So to start off, we have a little gentleman cat, and like all cats, he has 38 chromosomes. So each of those little blue lines is going to represent a chromosome. So these 38 chromosomes are sorted into 19 pairs, and these are put into two groups. So the first 18 pairs are grouped together and are what we call autosomes. And the autosomes contain the majority of a gene a cat has, and both boy and girl cats are going to have the same types of autosomes. So the other group is called the sex-linked chromosomes, and they're what determine whether the cat is a boy or girl. So there's two types of these sex-linked chromosomes. We have the X chromosome, which is the bigger one, and we have the Y chromosome, which is smaller and has less information on it. So if the cat has a Y chromosome, like this kitty shown here, they will be a boy. So now let's look at a lady cat. She will also have 38 chromosomes in 19 pairs, and 18 of those pairs are also going to be autosomes, just like the little boy cat. However, she does not have a Y chromosome, but instead she has two X's for her sex-linked chromosomes. And the presence of these two X's is very necessary for the calico coloring. But before we get into that, we're first going to see how the base color of a cat is decided. So a cat can have one of three base colorings, either black, brown, or cinnamon. Now which base color the cat has is based on a gene found on one of the autosomal chromosomes and what alleles of that gene the cat has. So alleles are different versions of the same gene. In the case of cat coloring, there are three alleles. There's one for black, one for brown, and one for cinnamon. So because chromosomes work in pairs, each cat has two copies of this gene. So when two cats decide they want to make a little baby cat, they each give one of those genes to the kitten. So the kitten will also have two copies of the gene. So the black allele is the most dominant, meaning it will win when matched with any other alleles, and the cat will be black. The brown allele comes next, and it will win against the cinnamon allele. And the cinnamon allele is the most recessive, meaning it will not win against either of the other two, and the only way for a cat to be cinnamon is if it has two cinnamon alleles. But what about the ginger color that we see so often in cats? Well, for that, we're going to have to take a look at the sex chromosomes, and in particular, the X chromosome, because the gene for the ginger coloring is found on the X chromosome, and it has two different alleles, or two forms. So the first allele is represented by the big O, and it makes the ginger switch turn on. So when that switch is turned on, the ginger color is going to beat out any of the base colors, and the cat will be ginger. The second allele of the gene is represented by a little o, and this version turns the ginger switch off, and the base color is allowed to show through. So as we've seen, boy cats have one X and one Y chromosome. So whichever form of the gene they have on that one X chromosome is what is going to determine if they are ginger or not. So if they have the X with the big O, they're going to be ginger, an X with a little o, and they're going to be whichever base color they are. However, lady cats have two X's, which spices things up a little bit. So if both their X's have the big O's, they're going to be ginger. Both X's have the little O's, they're going to be whichever base color they are. But when a cat gets one X saying, hey, turn on the ginger, and one X saying, turn off the ginger, then we get a calico cat. And this happens because of a process called lionization. So a cell only needs one X chromosome to function, which is why boys can get away with only one X chromosome. But girls have two, so in this case, the body decides to randomly turn off or disable one of the X chromosomes in each cell by crumpling it up into a little ball. So this little crumpled X chromosome is called a bar body, which is shown here in blue, and the process of making these bar bodies is called lionization. When a female cat has two big O's or two little O's, it doesn't really matter which one becomes a bar body because both of them code for the same color. But when a cat has one big O and one little o, each cell will randomly make one version of bar body, and whichever versions remain will determine that cell's color. So a cat starts off as a bunch of cells, and the lionization will randomly make some ginger and some the base color. Now when these cells copy themselves to multiply, each copy will have the same bar body as the original cell it came from, which is how we get patches of color. And bar bodies are made completely randomly in each cell. One cool example of this is seen with the cat Rainbow and her clone carbon copy, or CC. Because they're clones, they have the exact same genes, but as you can see, thanks to the randomization of bar bodies, they have completely different code patterns. But why do many calico cats also have white patches? To answer that, we have to head back to the autosomal chromosomes, where the piebald gene is located. So the piebald gene is responsible for delaying the production of melanocytes, which are cells that make melanin. Now, melanin is responsible for producing the pigment that gives cats their coat color, whether that color be cinnamon, chocolate, black, or ginger. However, if the melanocytes are delayed, there'll be no melanin produced, and the cat will have no pigment. And this lack of pigment is what makes white fur. So there are different versions of alleles of the piebald gene, which code for different amounts of delay in melanocyte production. The more delayed the melanocyte, the longer the wait for pigment, and the more white fur a cat will have. So for a cat to be calico, they need to start with one of the base colors, it doesn't matter which one. They need to have two X chromosomes, one with the big O and one with the little o, and they need to have a version of the piebald gene that will delay melanocytes. So can a male cat be calico? Well, while most cats that have two X chromosomes are female, it is possible for a male to have an extra X chromosome. And this happens when a parent, instead of passing along one sex chromosome like normal, has something go wrong and accidentally passes on two sex chromosomes. And as long as one of these chromosomes is a Y, the kitten will be male. But this type of cat has what we call Klinefelter syndrome, and he physically cannot reproduce. Another way a male cat could be a calico is that if it is a chimera. This occurs when two little clumps of cells are hanging out in the womb, and one clump wants to grow up to be a female calico, and the other wants to grow up to be a male of any color. But something happens in the womb, and the two clumps form together and make one cat. And the clumps kind of divvy up what parts of the cat they code for. So the calico clump may code for the fur color, and the male clump may code for the genitalia. This will give us a calico male. Now this cat can reproduce, but it will only pass on the genes from the clump that coded for its reproductive organs. But this is very rare, and only 1 in 3,000 calico cats is male. And this is why it's most likely that if you see a calico cat, you're looking at a female.